What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next, we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting books that I saw popping up this week on the weekly Heritage Comic Auction. This one's all a little more modern books. These are the ones Heritage classifies as modern, which actually includes some copper and bronze as well. But there are a ton of really cool, big 9/8 books that are a part of this auction. Pretty unusual for what I usually see in a weekly auction. Let's check these out. All right. So before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So, if you're not aware, Heritage has their weekly comic auction where Sunday is Golden Age, Monday is Silver Age, and Tuesday is Bronze through Modern. And so I was going through the list of books like I do every week to see what was coming up in this weekly auction. And I was going through what Heritage classifies as modern, which is anything from 1980 through today. Now, I'm aware that that includes some bronze and a bunch of copper as well. But for Heritage, they just call that, they'll classify that all as modern. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. And I was going through this and I noticed a lot of 9/8s for some pretty key books, which I don't normally see this volume of them during a weekly auction. So thought it'd be interesting to go over these, what I think they might go for, what their records have been, and talk a little bit about these books. So here we've got kind of my little watch list that I have set up for this coming Heritage auction, and I've just got the modern books showing here. Like I said, the ones that Heritage classifies as modern. I am aware that some of them are bronze and some of them are copper. And if you see, like, kind of scroll through this, we've got a ton of 9/8s. We've got ASM 252, 300, Dark Knight Returns #1, Caliber Presents one. This is a big one here, Crow #1. And even though Crow #2 isn't a super expensive book, it's still a tough 9/8. A lot of black, just like Crow #1. We've got DC Comics Presents 26, Hulk 340, New Mutants 98. I mean, it's just like 9/8 after 9/8 after 9/8 of some pretty big keys. Now, there is this book here. This isn't a 9/8. I just thought this one would be fun to talk about. This is a complete bound series of all the Star Wars books from 1 through 107. Really cool looking one. I've been seeing a lot of these bound volumes coming up pretty much every week for the last month and a half on Heritage. It's just something I've noticed where I hadn't seen those very often, and either somebody has been letting go of a big collection of them, or just a bunch of people have been seeing that they've been getting strong numbers. So they've been selling them. I can't say for sure. Another really big one down here, this Walking Dead #1, again in a 9/8. So let's start talking about these books. We'll go through them, from the first book down to the last book on that list here. So we've got first Amazing Spider-Man 252. This is the first black suit Spider-Man. Classic cover, great cover. I remember when I got back into collecting comics, this was one of the books that I had really wanted at that time. I liked it a lot when I was a kid. I did have a copy from my childhood collection. And so just one of those books that I've always really liked. It does have the custom label. I'm not a big fan of custom labels, but whatever. That's not my thing, but other people seem to really like them. Now, the interesting thing with this is that this book I valued at $1,050. That's what I estimated this book would go for in this auction. And you can see here, it is already at 1,560. I actually had to go check my pricing again just to make sure I hadn't made some big mistake, because this is a couple days before this book is actually even going to sell. This is going to sell on Tuesday. And usually these books are well below what they'll actually ultimately sell at. And this one, I mean, I would be pretty shocked if it gets even another bid. But if we take a look at GPA and we go to Amazing Spider-Man 252, go down to a 9/8, just kind of look where this book has been selling. I mean, this entire year, the high was 1,320. And we've had a few sales down around 900. I had this book going for 1,050. I mean, this is already about $500, almost 50% above where I thought it would go. I don't know if somebody thinks this was a newsstand and made some mistake or what, but this is a very surprising bid already at this stage. I mean, if you went over to eBay, eBay is kind of ridiculous with this book, and you kind of go down, you see the newsstands. People have a bunch of crazy prices on these, but there is actually, if you keep scrolling down, there is one below that price. Actually, two below that price. We got one with a starting bid of 1,500. We've got one at 1456. These are already crazy prices. I mean, 1456 is the lowest. You can see from the last year, the high from the last 4 months or 3 months was 1,320. I mean, let's even go back into 2023. There's this one sale in December of 1850. But other than that, this book has been just trending down. I mean, look at this, just constantly trending down. And so these are dream prices right here on eBay. I think they got to lower their prices if they actually want these books to sell. But yeah, that's the first one. I don't know what's going on with that book. Really high price for that one. All right, now let's check out the next one here, which is this Amazing Spider-Man 300. It's a 9.8, but I will say, like this one, it's got a weird color strike on it, and that's something you will notice with this book, is that this one sometimes you can have these lighter, kind of like the lighter red on the 300, sometimes the darker red. This one actually has darker in the middle, and it fades out to the lighter on the edges. It doesn't look like there's any type of like sun fading or anything. It just looks like not really the best like color strike on this copy. But I have this going for 3,100. Its peak sale was 9,200 during the comic boom. Definitely a book that I think is still trending down. I mean, if we take a look at Amazing Spider-Man 300 and we just kind of get an idea how where this book is moving to, and it takes a long time to load because there's so many sales for this book. And if you look at this, I mean, nothing tells me that this is slowing down on its trend down. And if you look at the prices of this book prior to the comic boom, we look at 2020, even 2019, and we look at what this book was generally going for early 2020. This was like a 2,000-ish dollar book. I mean, you can see it had already started to spike later on in the year, where it started getting up to $4,000, $5,000. But to me, I think this book could easily drop down to like 2,500. It's already had a couple sales down like 2,700, 2,750. I wouldn't be rushing out to buy this book right now. I do think it's going to probably sell around 3,100. It's a 9.8 white pages, but I do think eventually this book is going to get down to around 2,500 before it really bottoms out. All right, next one here. This is the Dark Knight Returns. I mean, I don't know how you can't like this cover. It's such a cool cover. They actually had the original art for this sell on a Heritage auction maybe 8 months ago or a year ago. So I think it sold for around 2 million. Pretty cool original art. That would be a fun one. Definitely a fun one to own. But we've got this 9.8 here. Its record during the comic boom was $2,980. I have it going for $850. That's where I think this one's going to sell. Again, at 9.8 white pages. Just a classic cover, one that I think is a great book to own. I don't necessarily want to check every single book on here, but let's see where we think this one might be going, kind of like a little bit longer term. So you got Batman Dark Knight Returns #1 and a 9.8. I mean, you can see this last sale at 1,000. That was definitely an uptick here, a little bit of a high sale for that one. We've had some other sales, 995, 849, 800. But let's look at what this book was doing prior to the comic boom. You know, this book looks like generally it was down around $500, 500 to 550 in that range. So another book that I would not be surprised if this book continues to trend down. I'd be patient with this one too. I wouldn't be rushing out to buy it. I could see this book trending down to maybe around 600 or 650, somewhere in that range. Like I said, I think it's going to sell around 850, but I think it has some downside potential if you bought it at that price. All right, now the next one. Actually, we've got the first appearance of the Crow in this one. If you're not aware, that's what this book here is. Caliber presents #1, 9.8, first appearance of the Crow. This back cover makes this a very, very tough 9.8. I mean, there is so much black on this cover that this is not an easy 9.8. I mean, let's take a look how many 9.8s are out there. So if we go over here, we got 102 9.8s. That's the top of the census. There's no 9/9s. Actually, quite a few 9/8s. I mean, that's a little surprising that there are actually 102 9/8s for that book, given just this back cover. I mean, I wouldn't have expected 102. That's actually a little bit surprising to me. But maybe that's why this book just isn't all that expensive. Also, it's not the best front cover. I mean, that's what kind of I think hurts this book. The thing that you really want is what's on the back cover for this book. But this one had a peak sale of 3,650. I have it going for 2,200. So it definitely still has some work to do, but I have it estimated at 2,200 for this book. All right, now we're moving on to the big book of this group. This is this Crow #1, and obviously this is not the first appearance because the Caliber Presents #1 is the first appearance. But this is that other one, that very difficult 9/8, and this one is a pretty tough 9/8. I mean, it's the back cover too. I mean, so with this one, you have the front cover that's really tough and the back cover that is really tough. And this one, let's see, in a 9/8. There are 68 universal 9/8s out of 869 total. And this book had a peak sale of 14,400. Now, I do remember some bigger sales for this during that comic boom period, but I think some of them had like interior signatures or they were signed copies, all that kind of thing. But for a universal, at least on GPA, the record was 14,400. I have this going for 5,500. It's possible with that Crow trailer that just dropped that this will go up, but I've been seeing a lot of people that haven't really liked that trailer. Now, me, I'm not really all that familiar with the original movie. It wasn't something that I was really watching when I was a kid, but there do seem to be some people that do not care for for that trailer. So it might not actually help this book at all. It may actually drive this book down a little bit more, but I have it estimated at 5,500. Now, the next one is Crow #2. And so this one, I mean, basically just as hard of a 9/8 as Crow #1, but being issue #2, it doesn't go for nearly as much money. This book had a peak sale of 1,500, and I have it going for 1,450. I mean, you can see this thing is sitting at $134 right now. So definitely has some work to do. I don't think there's any chance it goes for that type of price. If we go take a look at Crow #2. These are not books in 9/8s that sell very often. So 1989 and Crow #2, we had, like, I mean, look at this. It's like just about like one sale per year is approximately what you get with this one. There was already a 9/8 sale this year for 1,448. So I have it at 1,450. This one didn't really seem to have like a big comic boom peak sale, probably just because it doesn't sell all that often. There were no 2022 sales. So it probably maybe missed that big spike, but I could see 1450. And that's why I really don't think that it's going to be staying down around these prices. All right. Now, the next one, we've got that first appearance of the new Teen Titans. So that's 15,834. So this is DC Comics Presents #26. So this is the new Teen Titans. Kind of zoom in here a little bit. We've got the also the first appearance of Raven, Cyborg, and Starfire. So this book has held up surprisingly well from its comic boom prices. Now it is down a lot, but it's still up quite a bit from where it was. So it had peaked at 2,850. I have this going for 925. So yeah, from its peak down like 65 to 70%, which is a lot. But if we take a look at DC Comics #26, so if we take a look at what this book had been at prior to the comic boom, and we look at a 9.8, I mean, prior to the comic boom, I mean, this book was like 550, 600, 650, kind of in that range. And it's still up like 50%. I mean, you look at these recent sales, 930, 1225, 900, 969. I mean, it's still up like 50% from those prices. Now, to me, that makes me go, I don't want to buy this book yet. That I think that this downward trend is going to continue. So I'd probably steer clear of it. Now, I do think that I just heard that they announced some type of live action Teen Titans. I don't know if it's a movie or a show, something like that. So maybe that will cause prices to go up again a little bit with this one, but I'd be cautious with it. I mean, I'm generally cautious with anything that's still well above these prices from prior to the comic boom. If it's up 10 or 20%, not a big deal to me. If it's up 50% still, like this is, or even a little more, those types of prices concern me. So I would be cautious with it. I do think it's probably going to sell for around 925, but I do think that there's a pretty big downside risk for that book at those prices. Right now, I love this cover. I've owned this one a couple times. I think it's one of the coolest covers to get signatures because I think it looks so cool when you get the signatures on Wolverine's claws. But we've got Hulk 340, the classic Wolverine, Incredible Hulk cover. Got a 9.8, currently sitting at $960. I have this one estimated at 1,100, had a peak sale of 2,400. This is another book that is well above what it had been at prior to the comic boom. I remember like before that big spike in prices, I think I bought a 9.6 for like $170. I mean, it's just like when you think about the prices still, like, I mean, some of these prices are still pretty elevated. I mean, look at this. Like, look at what this was before the comic boom. Like, let's go back to 2019. If we look at the prices, this was like $350, $400. Like, yeah, you have this one high sale of 740. Maybe that was a newsstand or something. This is like a 350, even down into the 300s to a $400 book. Then we had the big spike up to 2,400. That was the peak. And we are still over double. I mean, almost triple what those prices were prior to the spikes. I don't see any way that this book doesn't continue to trend down. This is one that there's no way I'd buy it right now. I feel like if you're buying this book right now, a year from now it's going to be worth less. 2 years from now it's going to be worth less. 3 years from now it's probably going to be worth less. I would not be buying this book. I think it is still way too elevated in price. And even if you get a good deal, this is the type of book that low sale is going to become the new ceiling because it's so high still from where it was. So I'd be very cautious with this book. These types of prices in a 9.8, I just wouldn't be touching it. All right, now the next book, this one, I mean, bound to heat up later this year. We've got this New Mutants 98 and 9.8, first appearance of Deadpool. I have this one going for 1,275, had a peak sale during the comic boom of 3,000. This is the type of book that I'm not even going to go look at the GPA prices. I would just say, don't buy it until after the movie, like, and probably like 6 months after the movie. I would say there's no reason to rush out and buy this book right now. This is not a rare book. You don't need to worry that there's not going to be any copies available for you. You're only going to, in my opinion, likely regret buying this book if you buy it leading up to that movie. It's like the only major Marvel movie coming out this year. And so it's going to have so much hype around it that I just don't see anything good, financially at least, coming from buying this book right now. And you might as well, if you want something else, go buy something else. Wait to pick this up like a year from now. And I think you'll be able to get it for either a much better price or at worst the same price. And you could have gotten something else and all that. So I would not be rushing out to pick up this book. Like I said, I think it'll go for $1,275 in that range. And I wouldn't buy it. That's my take on it. I think there's just gonna be too much hype around this book. All right, 941. Next one, we got more Teen Titans. This is New Teen Titans number 2. This is the first appearance of Deathstroke. Got a 9.8 and a newsstand in this one. Now it's 1980, so it's early on. And I know this can be kind of a contentious subject. Now, generally, from what I've seen, and this is because CGC doesn't break these out on their census, there's no way to know for sure. But it generally does appear that even though there are way more newsstands in this time period, when you're talking about 9.8s, there are at least equal to the directs or less. And so they often do still command a premium over the direct edition, even though the direct is more rare. So this book peaked at $1,800 during the comic boom. I have it going for 750. And if we go and take a look at that, we can kind of see that it does still go for a premium versus the direct. And I know some people, they don't care about that at all, and that's fine. You're allowed to collect whatever stuff you want to collect. Some people like to buy newsstands, some people like to buy Mark Jewelers, whatever. But you can see here that even though this last sale was high, this 805 was high, where this book has been selling, it's like 522, 555, 550, 675. I don't know why where that 805 sale came from. This book generally has been going around 550 to 650. And then if we look at the newsstand, this book, now there aren't nearly as many tracked, but you can see 775, and then last year 750, 810, 910. And so that's why I have this book going for 750. If it had been a direct edition, I probably would have had it going for like 600. But I think it's going to go for 750. Just so we can see a few more sales for this one, I'm going to look at the direct, and you can see that it is still trending down. Let's take a look at this book prior to the comic boom. This was going for $550, $600. I mean, these prices here other than this 805, for whatever reason that one happened, these prices aren't bad. I mean, they're kind of back down generally around where this book was going around 2019. And so probably not a bad pickup at those types of prices for the direct. Like this book doesn't feel all that risky at those types of prices. All right. So next one, this has got to be one of the most corrected books out there. She-Hulk or Savage She-Hulk #1 and a 9.8. This book peaked at $2,307. This was one of those that, I mean, it was primed to spike. I mean, we had the She-Hulk show, and you had everybody speculating and all the hype with the comic market and everything. This book peaked at $2,307. I mean, just wild, because I have this book going for $335. I mean, that's down like 85% from those peak sales. I mean, if you bought at those peaks, you are definitely regretting it. But I have this one going for $335. I feel like there can't be too much more downside risk with this book. I mean, I wonder if maybe it's even overcorrected a bit, just because people got so negative on this book after that show. But let's take a look at a 9.8. Like I said, I've got it going for $335. I mean, yeah, look at this. Like 2019, this book was $350 to $400 in a 9.8. I mean, even a little more, some $425, $445. Now, this book, let's see, in a 9.8, what's this book doing now? I mean, look at this, as low as $251, but $375, $324. I mean, it's like a $35 book now. I mean, it is below what it was prior to the spikes. So that tells me, like, I mean, yeah, it's possible it could still drop a little more, but your downside risk feels very, very low on this book. This is not a book that, if you're buying it at that kind of market price, $335-ish that I've said, I would not be worried about picking up that book. I think your downside risk is very low. All right, now here's that Star Wars bound volume. So if you're not familiar with these, basically people would take, because this one didn't seem like it was a publisher, because sometimes when they're from the publisher, they'll say it in the description, and they didn't say that here. So people would take all the issues or certain sets of issues and combine them together and have them bound into like hardcover books. And these ones are done really well. They actually gave now I asked for this in my last video. So I said, they had shown some of the books and they didn't show the actual books and the bindings. And I'm glad they showed it here. I mean, this looks great. I mean, look at that. I mean, this is really professional looking. If this wasn't done at the publisher, which they didn't say in the listing, so probably not, whoever had this done had it done really well, but looks awesome. There's no way somebody's breaking this up. Like, nobody's tearing these apart to sell them individually. They're buying it to keep it as this set of bound volumes, but it has all the issues 1 through 107. annuals 1 through 3, and this 4-issue Return of the Jedi miniseries. You can see they've all been trimmed and bound into these 5 hardcover volumes. These are really tough to value, but based on what I've been seeing, big numbers that people have been paying for these bound volumes lately. And so I estimated approximately $25 a book after they're trimmed, because a lot of these books are not going to have a lot of value. I mean, you've got the first issue has a bunch of value, 42 has a bunch of value, 107, the last issue, has some value, but the rest of them don't have a lot, especially when they're trimmed. And so the way I did it was I said, okay, approximately 100 books times 25 gets you 2,500. And then I've been seeing them double that price when they're selling in these nice bound volumes. So I'm estimating 5,000, but honestly, it's an educated shot in the dark. I think 5,000 could be what these go for. It's a really cool set. It's a really nice looking set. Wouldn't surprise me if it went for that. So I've got it going for 5,000. It'll be interesting to see what this one actually does sell for. All right. Now for some more Teen Titans. We've got Tales of the Teen Titans number 44. This is the first appearance of Nightwing, or when Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing. Got a 9.8. This is probably the least valuable of all the books that are in here. It had a peak sale of $850 during the comic boom. I've got it going for $275. It's sitting at $228 already. Yeah, I mean, kind of is what it is. It's a much more common 9.8. It's not really a big dollar book, but I've got it going for $275. All right, now the next one here. This one seems to sell it's not every week on the Heritage Auction, but they have them pretty regularly. Got the 9.8 of Ultimate Fallout number 4, first appearance of Miles Morales. Peak sale during the comic boom, $4,499. I have it going for $1,200. I think it's probably going to go for right around $1,200. I mean, it's been pretty consistently selling between $1,100 and $1,200 for the last quite a few months. So we'll see. We'll see if it keeps. It has been kind of trending down a little bit over time, but it feels like it's leveled off pretty good. I'm not sure how long it's going to hold on. If it's going to keep trending down again, because it is still up a lot from those pre-boom prices, but it's a little bit harder to predict with this one. This one seems to have a lot of support at kind of the $1,000 price point. I don't think it's fallen below 1,000 in the last few years. So I've got it going for 1,200. We'll see. We'll see what this one goes for. All right, now for one of the other pretty big books that's in this set. I'd say this is the second biggest book after the Crow number 1. This is that Walking Dead number 1, 9.8. This one had a peak sale of $4,999 during the comic boom. I've got it going for $2,600. I wouldn't really be surprised if it went a little lower than that. This one has definitely been trending down, but pretty cool book. I mean, it's just an iconic book. This is kind of one of those modern grails. You'd call it like a modern grail book. But yeah, I got it going for $2,600. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if it went a little bit below that. Bunch of first appearances in this book, iconic book from a very long running series, and obviously the television show, all that kind of stuff. All right, we got 2 books left. First one here is Wolverine number 1, the limited series. I have never been a huge fan of this cover. I know some people love it. I actually really like the cover to issue number 2. That's actually my favorite cover from this 4-issue run. But this book, peak sale during the comic boom, $1,365. I've got it going for $650. The interesting thing with this book is that there are a few 9.9s out there, and one sold recently. And it's pretty wild when you see how much more those 9.9s go for. So we go here and check out the prices for this one. We've got the 9.8. Like I said, I've got it going for $650. It's got a huge range. I mean, so you can see this lighter color that's around the dark line. That's the range in prices that this book sells for. It's got a huge price range. I mean, look at this, a low of $325. That is wild. I wonder where that one happened, or if it was maybe an incorrect listing. Maybe that was Wolverine 1 instead of Wolverine Limited 1 and got pulled in wrong. But you can see here, it's been pretty consistently selling for $700, $650, $600, that kind of thing. But if you jump up to the 9.9, one sold in January, $15,600. So you move up from that 9.8 to that 9.9, it goes for about 20 times as much. Now, that's the type of book that when I'm talking about that, the whole 9.9 grading thing, if you watch my recent video from CGC and the potential for the 9.9 pre-screen, this is the type of book that you should be a little worried about if you own that. These 9.9s, you could potentially get a bunch more added to the census. And I think what people don't realize is it doesn't take a ton of them. It doesn't have to be 1,000 9.9s added to the census to cause an issue with those prices. There's 28 right now. What if that jumps to 100? Out of these 4,000 9.8s, what if 100 of them become 9.9s? And now you're at 128 or 100 or whatever. I mean, that's going to have a significant impact. That is a huge percentage jump in available copies in that grade. And I would bet you most of the people that resubmit their 9.8s, if they got a 9.9, they're going to sell it immediately. And so it's going to just flood the market with them. And so that's why I would be especially cautious of those high dollar 9.9s right now. To me, it's too risky with what we've been seeing out of CGC lately. So I'd be cautious if you have one of those high dollar 9.9s. All right. Now, the last book, one of the hottest books that's out there because of Taylor Swift and the potential that she could be playing Dazzler. We got X-Men number 130 and a 9.8. I haven't seen this one pop up too often in a 9.8, but this one had a peak sale of 3,050. That was during the comic boom. It has not caught up to that, even with all the Taylor Swift hype. I have it going for 1,750. This is another one of those books I would not be rushing out to buy this book. I would be very cautious with this. Anything right now that is hyped, because there isn't a lot of stuff that has a big speculative push behind it. And this is one of the books that does. I'd wait like a year and see what happens. I would not be rushing out to buy this one either, but 1,750, that's what I think it's going to go for. We'll see. It's definitely one of those books that's been hot, all because of the speculation that, Taylor Swift might be playing Dazzler, maybe in the upcoming Deadpool movie. All right. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe this helps you if you've been looking at some of these books, if you've been thinking about picking up any of these big keys from that kind of like the late bronze, copper up through modern era. I just thought this was interesting because I don't typically see this many 9.8s of pretty big books, especially that Crow number 1. Crow number 1, 9.8 usually shows up in one of the signature auctions, not necessarily in a weekly. But thought this would be interesting to talk about. If you enjoyed this, if you'd like to see more videos like this, I got more videos over here. I've got the subscription button right here, and I will see you in the next video.